Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Einar from Wardruna to talk about the new upcoming album. How's it going?
It's going good. It's of course hectic times. Only a few days left now until the release, so it is how it's how it should be, I guess.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for taking the time to chat with me about the record. I really enjoyed the album, and I really wanted to pick your brain to get to know a little bit of what went into making this record. And the first question that I have for you is, did you seek inspiration for this album, or did this album kind of found you?
Well, I guess in the whole in my whole approach and to music in general, I guess it's a combination of both. Sometimes the well, as a starting point, of course, I think all music and should be born out of a desire to that you have something you want to say in a way. So in that sense, it kind of comes through you. It's not something you seek out, but of course, it's a combination. So yeah, inspiration can come from all sorts of things. Sometimes the themes I've been working with or I work with are have such strong images to it that I just hear it, and then it's about chasing it down. It can be a melody, it can be poetry that comes. Yeah, so there isn't a sort of a one recipe for it, I would say.
That leads me into my next question, which is, it feels to me that you don't necessarily have a roadmap that you take always the same path when you're working on on an album. You look at each album and you create each album in its very unique way. Is that correct?
Yeah, not only each album, but each song, because yeah, all albums follow this creative concept where it's the themes themselves that sort of defines my instrumental needs, the sounds I use, language, where I record, when I record. So to a certain degree, you can almost say that it's the themes that is the composer and I am the instrument. But yeah, so yeah, each album, even though in many ways I feel that all my works kind of belong together. It's yeah, every song lives its own life, and I'm in terms of working with the songs, you probably notice that I don't work with these normal song structures where you have a verse and a refrain, and so this normal grid of writing songs. For me, it's more about letting the song take me where it wants to go, rather than me trying to squeeze it into a predetermined shape in a way. And that so that whole process is very much organic and very intuitive and yeah, uh, organic, I would say. Yeah.
When you're going through this process, do you ever find yourself perhaps losing yourself within that process, and then trying to search for a way out of it? Because these songs, kind of, as for me as the listener, it allowed me to lose myself within them. So do you lose yourself a little bit within them as you're creating them?
Um, yeah, of course. Yeah, in certain parts of that process, I very much go into it with my whole being. So that whole creative bubble that I go into is very much. Uh, yeah, it's very all consuming and yeah, it's hard to do other things when I'm in that state. But I guess it's a balance. It's a balance between that and of course it's hard work. It also demands a lot of focus, and you know, some songs they come really easy. They just fall into place, and sometimes it can take years to finish a song. There are songs on this album that I started sort of working with or yeah, playing around with perhaps like 10 years ago. So you never know when the time comes. And in many ways it's a discipline, this romantic idea that you can just sit on a tree stump and just get struck by inspiration. That it doesn't really work like that. Sometimes it does, but very often it's hard work. You need to work through it, and yeah. So I guess it's a balance, but it can come in so many different shapes, that whole creative process.
As you're working on the record, as you're discovering these songs, do you feel like you perhaps discover also a little bit of yourself with each song, with each record? And if so, what have you discovered about yourself with this specific album?
Well, the short answer is of course. I feel, I guess my approach is so, I don't know, since I go into it very much, both in regards to the academic approach that sort of it lays the groundwork before I go into these creative processes. It's yeah, each song I learn a lot, whether it's about me or as a human or as a composer or yeah, other aspects as well, and the themes themselves. So in many ways you can say that each song feels like almost like an initiation, and a lot of these things I know a lot about before I start working with the actual song. But I guess well, when you're working with, one thing is reading about something or experiencing something, but then processing that, letting that come through you into, or be sort of manifested into a work of art, that's something else. You need to own it, own that knowledge in a different way, or own that feeling, or whatever it is you're working with. So yeah, I learn a lot and I grow a lot, and yeah, for each album, it feels in many ways like I'm going deeper.
What made the title, like I guess the rough translation of the title is White Raven. So what made that title important for this collection of tracks?
Well, there are many reasons for it. The album is, even though it's sort of wandering in the same realms as the other albums, I would say it zooms a little bit more closely in, and perhaps it dives more into the human sphere and how we relate to nature and certain animals, and also certain definitions of the self, of the human, in the light of how you in earlier times defined us as human, not only as just consciousness and body, or consciousness, body and soul, but in this way of regarding it, it goes much deeper, and it's more layered, more complicated, I would say. And this album kind of explore some of these concepts. And of course, one of the recurring things is the raven. And the raven is such a central symbol and character in the Norse tradition. Of course, in many other traditions as well. I would go as far as to say, if we ever had a totem here, it would be the raven. It represents so many different things. But it acts as the bridge between here and the beyond. It carries the dead across. it's the trickster. It is through the myth we know that it is seen as the sort of animal embodiment of the human mind and memory. So it is kind of like the human, but within nature, in a way. So that in itself has a very powerful symbolism, I would say, and central um, um, function. And then you of course add these sacred white animals that we see, not only ravens, um, and we see them. It seems almost like a global phenomena, these myths and traditions around the white animals, and often they come with some sort of prophecy of bringing about something, some form of renewal or enlightenment, or it can be many different things. And I don't know, I guess the title reflects perhaps some form of hope or call to change, or I don't know. There are of course many layers to it, but yeah, it is kind of the return of sending the white raven into the world felt like
Mhm.
the right thing, and a very suitable arch for the whole album. As it kind of, I don't like preaching, and I hate sort of claiming truth or whatever. But if my music does have like one message, it would be this idea that um, that it would benefit us all if we as a species had a more animistic view of the world. By that I mean um, the idea that nature is something sacred, plain and simple. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a spiritual thing at all. It's an attitude, you know. The second you regard yourself as part of this place, and not the rulers of it, in a way, the caretakers of it. That's what we have the potential to do.
One of the elements of this record that personally I wasn't really able to hold on to is obviously the lyrics. So I had to hold on to the sound. But I wanted to ask you about the lyrics. What kind of work, what kind of thought process goes into the lyrics for the tracks on this record?
I would say the poetry and the poetry is very very central, very important. Of course, the music stands and is fully, you're fully, well, it's melodic, it's rhythmic, it's and also not understanding the lyrics gives you actually a different kind of experience, because it creates um, some form of distance. So it's easier to find yourself within the song in a way. But at the same time, I would say that the lyrics do play an important part, or give an important layer, and something I definitely would recommend people to dig into at some point, also to, yeah, both to be inspired or learn things about these things, various themes I'm singing about. But I don't know. It's for me. It's important to. Well, I'm very much inspired by old poetry, but try to do it in my own way, and not to say the least, in my own words, in my own, yeah, like these themes, owning them and let them go through me. Like, for instance, the song Moon in on the album, which is of course um, about one of Odin's ravens, the memory bird, and the myth of Odin's two ravens. They are described in a very beautiful poem, which of course I could have just chosen to recite then and there. But for me, I guess with all of these things, it's more about not only it's not about reciting the past or traditions. It's more about diving into what it actually means, why it applies, and to do that, I think it's important dig deeper into understanding it and then making it your own in your own words.
You mentioned the word vessel before in our conversation, and listening to this album, listening to your albums in general, but with this record specifically, I felt like you were a little bit of a shaman, and you were bringing something to a group of people that perhaps didn't have a chance to dive into these topics and dive into these themes. Do you see yourself a little bit from that role, from that perspective, that you have a very specific thing that you're trying to achieve, that you're trying to do, being that shaman for a whole new generation?
Well, I wouldn't claim that title, which is of course not something you should do. That's something others have to give you, and a function you have to have in a way. But of course, I see your point, and but it's really not, my focus is really not on the listener. It is actually about, well, I sing the songs I want to hear myself, and I give voice to certain things that I feel is worth remembering. I guess that's my focus, and of course the fact that so many people connect to it is an amazing thing, and yeah, I do feel that well, even though it's not my focus, I do definitely see the importance in actually rediscovering some of these beautiful things from our past to also understand us now. Yeah, if that gives you an answer to the
Yeah, and I know you don't want to take the title, but I'm going to give you that title anyways.
All right.
I have one last question for you, and that is, what do you hope the listeners take from this record?
I'm not sure it's well, like I said before, if it is one thing, I guess, well, the one of the recurring themes on the songs are also this desire to grow, this desire to reflect and ask questions, and yeah, finding the balance between knowledge, seeking knowledge internally and externally, and so I guess the only thing you can hope for is that they find some form of inspiration within it, that it yeah, that's the only thing I can hope for, in a way. It's sort of it is a beautiful thing, and something I'm very grateful to experience in my meeting with fans and followers of our music, to see that people very often connect to it in a yeah, a personal and deep way, that it does inspire to yeah, inspire to grow, basically, to find themselves in it, and that's something I think about a lot when I write lyrics as well. I always write things as open-ended, so there is room for you to find your own way into it, and yeah, that's one of the things I love with these with old poetry, old Nordic poetry, and also regarding the runic poetry that we have the old rune poems, which are basically almost like riddles, throwing questions at you in a way, and that's so thought-provoking. That's the best way of learning, in my opinion, and like for me, that's nothing gets me going more than yeah, these kind of poems that triggers the curiosity.
Well, I'll say this about this record. Listening to this album made me feel like I need to be a better person. I connected with it on a spiritual level, and I thought it was such a impactful record from that perspective, that you can listen to that music and not feel something, and not feel driven to do something. What that something is going to be, I think that's up to us to discover on our own paths, on our own journey. But this album did that. So congratulations on that front.
Well, thank you so much. You know, I guess the first place to start is to do all the things that you know deep within you should do. It's pretty easy, but we tend to forget and have this extreme need for confirmation outside ourselves to basically just say the things we already know. If my music can be a reminder of those things, that's of course a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you for your time as well. All the best with the album release, and stay safe and stay healthy out there.
Thanks for having me, and
Thank
thank
you.
you